It's fine. percentage of women also competing or participating competitively was so low. Now, as we speak, is 50-50.
To see how we can disrupt the narrative in terms of sports women and their opportunities. And I would like to thank the President, Dr. Mutangat, for the invitation. I've enjoyed being here. And I think my main
The percentage of
to the
women
committee
also
is
competing
to
or
really address the issue of
competitively
in sports
was so low.
in terms of
Now, as we speak,
opportunities
is
that they get
50-50.
in terms of how we can disrupt the narrative. Are they getting compensated the same as sports women counterparts? And the shares to do their support because a lot of them are also mothers and they also have enjoyed the careers. So I think my main
The percentage of
especially the
women
issue
also
is
competing or
really address the issue which also address now
competitively
sports
was so low.
in terms of
Now, as we speak, is 50-50.
Najua tuko hapa pia kukuza wengine. Nashukuru kwa hiyo opportunity. Naweza sema hii gender conference itatusaidia sana motivate na inspire wanawake wengine kuchukua leadership.
Competitive was so low. Now, as we speak, is 50-50.
Najua tuko hapa pia kukuza wengine. Nashukuru kwa hiyo opportunity. Naweza sema hii gender conference itatusaidia sana motivate na inspire wanawake wengine kuchukua leadership.
Competitive was so low.
And so that's why she's got her name in her face. But the rest of the players, we are not able to see them being prominent, being brought up, being prominent. But they also go through the same. But at the end of it all, understanding where they are coming from, I realize that we could always make a great somewhere. And using that, we've been able to have several programs.
Not only am I an entertainer, I'm in a space now where I'm also very much into ownership. And I think that we as women should always look into that and consider what does it look like to own. Not only own the space, own platforms.
To how can we achieve gender equality? And I think some of the conversation this morning was about where actionable steps. Can you show it to us? Are you accountable? And we say that for you to be able to tackle gender equality or gender inequality, you need to understand equity, inclusion, and the barriers women face.
But they also go through the same. But at the end of it all, understanding where they are coming from, I realize that we could always make a great somewhere. And using that, we've been able to have several programs.
Not only am I an entertainer, I'm in a space now where I'm also very much into ownership. And I think that we as women should always look into that and consider what does it look like to own. Not only own the space, own platforms.
To how can we achieve gender equality? And I think some of the conversation this morning was about where actionable steps. Can you show it to us? Are you accountable? And we say that for you to be able to tackle gender equality or gender inequality, you need to understand equity, inclusion, and the barriers women face.
But they also go through the same. But at the end of it all, understanding where they are coming from, I realize that we could always make a great somewhere. And using that, we've been able to have several programs.
Not only am I an entertainer, I'm in a space now where I'm also very much into ownership. And I think that we as women should always look into that and consider what does it look like to own. Not only own the space, own platforms.
To how can we achieve gender equality? And I think some of the conversation this morning was about where actionable steps. Can you show it to us? Are you accountable? And we say that for you to be able to tackle gender equality or gender inequality, you need to understand equity, inclusion, and the barriers women face.
But they also go through the same. But at the end of it all, understanding where they are coming from, I realized that we could always make a great somewhere. And using that, we'll be able to have stable programs.
Not only am I an entertainer, I'm in a space now where I'm also very much into ownership. And I think that we as women should always look into that and consider what does it look like to own. Not only own the space, own platforms.
To how can we achieve gender equality? And I think some of the conversation this morning was about where actionable steps can you show it to us? Are you accountable? And we say that for you to be able to tackle gender equality or gender inequality, you need to understand equity, inclusion, and the barriers women face.
But they also go through the same. But at the end of it all, understanding where they are coming from, I realized that we could always make a great somewhere. And using that, we'll be able to have stable programs.
Not only am I an entertainer, I'm in a space now where I'm also very much into ownership. And I think that we as women should always look into that and consider what does it look like to own. Not only own the space, own platforms.
To how can we achieve gender equality? And I think some of the conversation this morning was about where actionable steps can you show it to us? Are you accountable? And we say that for you to be able to tackle gender equality or gender inequality, you need to understand equity, inclusion, and the barriers women face.
But they also go through the same. But at the end of it all, understanding where they are coming from, I realized that we could always make a great somewhere. And using that, we'll be able to have stable programs.
Not only am I an entertainer, I'm in a space now where I'm also very much into ownership. And I think that we as women should always look into that and consider what does it look like to own. Not only own the space, own platforms.
To how can we achieve gender equality? And I think some of the conversation this morning was about where actionable steps can you show it to us? And we say that for you to be able to tackle gender equality or gender inequality, you need to understand equity, inclusion, and the barriers women face.
But they also go through the same. But at the end of it all, understanding where they are coming from, I realized that we could always make a great somewhere. And using that, we'll be able to have stable programs.
Not only am I an entertainer, I'm in a space now where I'm also very much into ownership. And I think that we as women should always look into that and consider what does it look like.
The percentage of women also competing or participating competitively was so low. Now, as we speak, is 50-50.
To see how we can disrupt the narrative in terms of sports women and their opportunities. And I would like to thank the President, Dr. Walter, for the invitation. I've enjoyed being here. And I think my main message to the committee is to really address the issues that affect women in sports in terms of opportunities that they get, in terms of compensation, Are they getting compensated the same as the male counterparts? Issues to do with their support, because a lot of them are also mothers. They also are pursuing other careers, so do they get support? And especially the issue of gender-based violence. Committee also address that and come up with policies to address that.
Nasikia poa, nasikia niko nyumbani. Najua tuko hapa pia kukuza wengine, so nashukuru kwa hiyo opportunity. Naweza sema hii gender conference itatusaidia sana motivate na inspire wanawake wengine kuchukua leadership roles.
There was a lot of challenges in terms of us convincing people that as a woman you don't need protection because decisions. And so even if you come down to when we're talking about the question of women in sports, you still see that even how many women do we see as ambassadors? Faith Kipyegon has come out strongly because she's managed to win the hearts of Kenyans and the hearts of people. And so that's why she's got her name in her face. But the rest of the players, we are not able to see them being prominently being brought up, being prominently, but they also go through the same. But at the end of it all, understanding where they are coming from, I realized that we could always make a great somewhere. And using that, we've been able to have several programs.
Not only am I an entertainer, I'm in a space now where I'm also very much into ownership. And I think that we as women should always look into that and consider what does it look like to own. Not only own the space, own platforms.
To how can we achieve gender inclusion? And I think some of the conversation this morning was about where are the actionable steps that we are taking. Can you track them? Can you show it to us? Are you accountable to them? And we say that for you to be able to tackle gender equality or gender inequality, you need to understand equity, inclusion, and the barriers women face.
Of women in leadership.
Hello, is the meeting on?
Hello, Ms. Ross. It is on. We are just about to start.
Okay. I think it's good. Barbara, are you ready to start? Yes, we are ready to start. The team, sorry about that, mishap. So Susan, please, can you project for us? Okay, thank you very much, team, for getting us started. So we shall start off by just introducing the topic. And we have an interesting topic for us to discuss in Women in Sports Leadership. We're talking about the myth, reality, and the road ahead. When we look at this conversation, we are looking at this from the perspective of what we've done as a women in sports, particularly from the National Olympic Committee of Kenya. In the last quadrennial, we marked the launch of the Step Up series, which was a women empowerment program that was designed to challenge and inspire women to take up leadership roles within their national federations. Well, this is still something that we will continue to track and continue to engage you on. We are looking at this first webinar within this team to look at how we can ensure that we go beyond participation, ensuring that women do have the toolkits that they require in order to aspire to leadership. For those already in leadership, to aspire to even higher opportunities that may be available. So if we, please go forward. So let's start off with a bit of housekeeping. So we shall request that you share your questions with us using the chat function at the bottom of your screen. Some of you have already found it and used it, so please feel free to share that with us. We shall also have an opportunity for you to participate in this conversation through the poll questions. And so during this presentation, please we look forward to hearing from you on that. And then finally, your microphones and cameras have been switched off by default for now. And this is just to ensure that we have control over the engagement. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, so I'd love to introduce the panelists. As you saw in the poster, we have got 4 esteemed speakers with us, or 3 esteemed speakers and 1 moderator. She may not be as esteemed as she thinks she is, but moving forward to the first one, I have the privilege of introducing Madam Rose Wasike, who is sorry, to the next slide. Madam Rose Wasike is the sports registrar at the Ministry of Youth Affairs, Creative Economy and Sports. She has been in the forefront of talking about how sports regulation in Kenya should be managed. But prior to this, she was in the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, where she held various roles, from acting as the registrar of the Kenya Labor and Employment Court. She was also the deputy registrar of the Industrial Court, that's now known as the Employment and Labor Relationship Court, and also a legal officer in the Ministry of Labor. She was involved in the repeal or review of the role of the laws in labor and the Children's Act.
She's also an advocate of the Higher Court, has a master's degree in women's law from the University of Zimbabwe, and also has attended the University of Nairobi and the Kenya School of Law. Our next panelist is Colonel retired Nation Ranjek, who is the second deputy or president of the National Olympic Committee of Kenya, also the president of Kenya Hockey Union, an executive board member of the Africa Hockey Federation, and even more importantly in today's conversation, he's a member of the FIH, International Hockey Federation, Gender, Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Finally, we have Angela Luchivia. She is an executive board member at the National Olympic Committee of Kenya. She's a Secretary General of the Kenya Basketball Federation. She heads the FIBA Zone 5 Women Commission, and she's also therefore in the FIBA Africa Board Members Women's Commission. So join me in welcoming these esteemed speakers. Next slide, please. Thank you. So let's have a snapshot of where we are. So in Kenya, when we talk about women in sports leadership, the NOC has 33% representation, 5 women who sit in the NOC executive board. Under the leadership of our president, Shadrach Maluki, we have ensured that there is focus on ensuring that we have this representation, 3 of whom were elected and 2 of whom were co-opted, so that we meet the 1/3 gender rule. And that's why we have the 33%. In as far as federations are concerned, we're just looking at some data that we had collected earlier in this year. 54 women hold various roles in the 29 federation boards. And out of those, we looked at which of these are impact roles. 17% are president. Another 17% are either first or second vice president. 21% are secretary general, while another 21% are treasurer. So this shows that we still have quite a way to go in ensuring that we are able to have women in impact roles within the federations. Though this does not belittle those who are holding other roles, that they are not adding value to the executive committees, but it would be great to see that we are more engaged in impact roles. Let's move forward. Next slide, please. So let us look at what the IOC position is in as far as the gender equality and inclusion framework. And as you can see, there are 5 areas or 5 principles that the IOC has placed focus on. The first principle being participation. Here we look at undertaking efforts to promote women's leadership and gender equality in governance models. Now, this could take various, this could look different in various ways. This could include promoting women into decision-making roles in sports organizations. It could also include ensuring that the existing policies are gender sensitive and reviewing the requirements for board membership and other governance bodies and committees to remove any discrimination or bias against women. The second is, in the second principle, looks at leadership, where we also ensure that there's more representation in this area. Sorry, I think there's one member's asked that we increase the font size. Then we also have safe sport. So we need to undertake efforts to prevent and respond to violence against women and girls in and through sports. This includes promoting zero tolerance of non-accidental violence against women and girls in sport, improving the education and awareness among athletes and entourage members. We also have portrayal. I think it's very important to ensure that in as far as portrayal is concerned, we ensure that there are enough opportunities for us to be able to report comprehensively on how well women are participating in sport, and not just from the perspective of sexualized material. Then we also look at resource allocation, and it is very important to also look at that and ensure that we are closing the gap for women in sports and promoting equal economic, opportunities for women and girls. So this includes things like striving for equal pay and prize money, increasing investments in the development of women in sports, and increasing opportunities for women athletes to benefit from sponsorships. Next slide, please. So while this is the IOC Gender Equality Inclusion Framework, let's look at what the NOC priorities are. So for one, we need to reach a gender balance in governing bodies with a minimum representation of 30%. This includes executive committees, general assembly, and commissions. To strive for gender balance in games leadership teams, and to increase women coaches. These are not the areas that you can be able to participate, and we look forward to hearing from you on other ways in which you would love to participate in your various leadership roles. So we shall move on now to the first poll question. Sorry, before I move on to the first poll question. The NOC snapshot for Kenya, these are the 2020 games. So we found that in as far as the athletes are concerned, this is the first band. We had 0.87 parity, meaning that for every male athlete, there was a 0.87 female athlete as part of the team. But where we fell short considerably, this is in regards to women taking leadership positions as team managers, chef de missions, coaches, we were 0.43%. We are waiting for the data from the Paris Games to see what improvements we have made and how much further we have to go to move forward. So I will hand over to Barbara to prepare the first poll question before we go to the panelists.
So for our first poll is, do you believe the glass ceiling in sports leadership is breaking? We have either two options of yes or no, not yet. Thank you for bringing in your responses. I see we are at 38 capacity. So if you can continue giving our response to the poll. "19 participants have submitted their answers. Can we kindly continue submitting our answers in the poll? We are at 21. I see we are now at 27 participants. If we can have just 3 more so that we can hit the 30 number. Okay, thank you very much for your responses. So from the poll is, we get that 33% have said yes, we have achieved, or rather the glass ceiling in sports leadership, while 67 think that we have not yet achieved the glass ceiling in sports leadership. So I hand it over to Doreen to take us through the first panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you so much, participants, for sharing your views. That is a very interesting result. 33% yes, and 67% say not yet. So then I pass on to the panel by asking the first round of questions. I'll start with Madam Registrar. Madam Registrar, are there existing Kenyan laws or policies enough to ensure that there is equity in sports leadership?
To answer that question, I hope everyone is hearing me. Hello?
Yes, we can.
You are hearing me well?
Very well.
To answer that question, we must start by defining the term equity. And equity means fairness and impartiality in treatment, access, and opportunity. So equity, in short, refers to the principle of fairness, justice, and impartiality. Unlike equality, which emphasizes on treating everyone the same, equity recognizes that people have different needs and challenges. So in conclusion, equity plays a vital role in fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion within organizations and society at large. And we will have to do that by recognizing and addressing the unique needs of individuals to help break down barriers to success and provide all individuals with tools that they need to succeed, regardless of their starting point. So with that in mind, before I go to the existing legislations and policies, we must apply equity when dealing with both male and female. Now, in terms of whether we have legal instruments and policies to guide at least the principle of equity in sports, we should start with the Kenya Constitution, the Constitution of Kenya 2010, which has given an elaborate things that we need to do to achieve the two-thirds gender rule and inclusion of all in appointive and elective positions. And first of all, if you look at Article 10 of the Kenya Constitution, it gives out the national values that each and every person or every organization needs to adapt when appointing people in positions, in elective positions, and many others. And it includes inclusivity and recognition of the marginalized. Then you come to the Sports Act. Apart from that, you can also look at Chapter 6 of the Constitution, that we must operate with transparency, accountability, and fairness in everything we do. Then we have the Sports Act, which is the main act that governs sports in the country. When that act was met in 2013, the Constitution was already in place. But somehow, when it came in place, it missed out on inclusion of safeguarding of children, women, and the marginalized. The major provisions that are there is just on governance, term of office, and how to manage the organization. But anything in relation to children, women, and the marginalized, inclusivity, two-thirds gender rule, missed out. Then you come and look at the Anti-Doping Agency, the Anti-Doping Act of 2016. Somehow it also missed out on that. You come out and look at the other various laws that applies in relation to gender discrimination and all that. I can say that other laws are there, but in the sports industry, people are reluctant to implement those laws. And the main laws that are there include the following. We have the Children Act of 2024, which actually highlights that children need to be protected, and we need to have safeguarding policies and laws in our Sports Act to ensure that our children are protected and the women and the marginalized are also protected. If you look at Article 54, 55, and 43. Then you come and look at the Persons with Disabilities Act. Same, it has provisions on how to safeguard the women with disabilities, the children, and all that, but nothing in our Sports Act. Look at the Labor Relations Act, look at the Employment Act, all the 5 laws that govern employment. If you look at Article 41 of the Constitution, it is very clear that when you are dealing with women and men, they should be paid the same. But in sports, you find that when a woman team is going out, and the male team is going out, you'll find that the treatment they are given is different. You'll find the male team sleeping in a very nice hotel. The women team are at a lower hotel. Even their allowances, before we came up with the proper regulation on a proper guideline on how to pay them, it varies. Even awards varies. So what we are saying is that it is not that we don't have the laws, because the laws are there. Even the ILO conventions are there. UNESCO convention, international conventions are there. The human rights conventions are there. African charters are there. The protocols are there. But according to me, it is the issue of implementation in addition to non-provision of the relevant provisions in the Sports Act. Even the sports registrar regulations that guide implementation of the Sports Act also missed out on that. That's what I can conclude. And the policies are also there. You can find we have a children policy, we have the gender policy, we have the child labor policy. But as a government, we don't have a national safeguarding policy to cover children, women, and the marginalized. Thank you. Any question? Something I've not covered? I've just summarized.
Thank you very much, Madam Registrar. You have captured for us that not only do we have laws within Kenya, but also internationally that allow us to be able to take up these leadership roles. However, you've mentioned that the reluctance to implement the law and different treatment are some of the challenges that we face today. And so I will turn on the question to Colonel Randiek, Second Deputy as the NOC, to ask about male allyship. Colonel Randiek, what does true male allyship look like? How can we look at the things that Madam Registrar has spoken about and address them practically within our federations and other leadership roles?
Thank you very much, Doreen. Before I proceed, I would like to ask Madam Wasike. She's painted a very rosy picture about the laws and the structure in place. And then in equal measures, she says that actually these laws are not implemented, or if they are supposedly being implemented, there is nobody who monitors to ensure that they're implemented. And if they are not implemented, then some action are supposed to be taken. So who is this big man with a big stick who will ensure that these laws in place will be followed to the letter? Because by just having laws in place and they are not adhered to means nothing. So that is, I think, a place where we should be starting from. If we don't get it right from there, then we should forget about what we are talking about. Now let me move to the question that has been posed to me. What does true male allyship for women leaders look like? What I would like to say and point out as I begin is true allyship should go beyond a symbolic gesture, because symbolic gesture alone will not help our case. And this means if we want to be good allies, then we must advocate for women who are not present in the room. You see, what do I mean here? Is we should put in a case and fight for women, whether they are there or not. And we should ensure that if we apportion or allocate or appoint any women, then we must follow it through and ensure that it happens. Because if it doesn't happen, then it makes no meaning and it will not help our case. Going further, I must say that we must be the first, actually, we must be on the front line to challenge biased systems. We have a lot of systems which are biased. So what are we doing to change those systems? So we must, as their allies, we must challenge those systems and have those systems changed to favor the other gender. You know, I think here when we talk about gender, it should be either gender. So those systems should be favorable to either side. Then we must actively mentor and sponsor female talent. If we fail to do that, then, you know, it is all what I started with. It will be just, you know, symbolic gesture, and it will not help. It is about using, and we must also use, you know, our privileges. You know, most of us, most of the men we are talking about are privileged. So then, if you are privileged, can you use your privilege to create access for the lesser gender so that now they can also compete on the equal level? And, you know, not just offering them encouragement. You know, you encourage and you don't you follow through to enforce, then actually you are not doing much. So the points that I've touched on, I think if we actualize those points, then women will actually be true allies to our women, and we will actually be working towards promoting them to reach where they are supposed to reach. They will be actually now be in the process of, you know, of breaking the glass ceiling we were talking about, because as you looked at the percentages, you saw that 63% said no, but I would have given a third answer. And my third answer should have been not a clear no, but not yet. But there are some cracks already we can see. The cracks are there, so it's about to. So let me stop there and let somebody else carry on from there. But I welcome any questions which are there for me.
Thank you, Mr. Second Deputy President of NOC, Colonel Randiek. I really appreciate your viewpoints. You've talked about symbolism, or therefore empty symbolism is an area that we should not dwell on, but actually look at actively mentoring and sponsoring female talent wherever it may be. And there's also the question that you posed to Madam Registrar, which we shall come back to. But the questions that you have, or rather the point that you have brought across about active mentorship, brings me to the question I have for Angela Luchivia, our second board member who's joined us today. And Angela, I'd really like to hear from your personal perspective, what your experience has been and what personal barriers and enablers have shaped your journey to leadership in sport. And what, as the perspectives shared by Madam Registrar and Colonel Randiek, affected you in any way?
Thank you. Thank you, Doreen, and good evening, everyone. For me, first, I would like to say that my journey in sports leadership has been full of learning. It's been all about learning first. And most of that learning has not come from any books, any titles, anything that is there really written, but it's more about the experiences that I have gone through and that has forced me to grow. Reason being that these experiences is what creates lessons and is what creates, it might end up being a print of what could be used in future. But when I look back, I see a trail of moments that have really shaped me Some have been very uncomfortable. Some have been very unexpected, but all of them, I have taken them in stride, and they have become meaningful to me in ways that they have grown me. Looking at the first barrier that I would say first is visibility and perception. In most sports boardrooms and in most sports federations and in most spaces, not just even in the sporting field, because I come from the corporate world where I have been for the last more than 20 years. It's not many times you walk into a room and the gender equity or equality is 50-50. Most of the time, there's more women. I mean, there's more men. I would love it to be more women. There's more men than there is women. So most of those times you will find that when you walk in, the first thing that, sometimes people are looking at you like, what have you come to do here? Why are you here? Why is she here? Is she even going to give any meaningful discussions to what we want to talk about? So you find that as a woman, the first thing is that visibility and perception. And for me, that became a challenge more than a barrier, because then I took it in stride and made sure that every time I step into a room, I step into a meeting, and especially those that I know are going to have more men than women, I over-prepare. I get my facts right. I get to be able to talk about facts, to be able to talk about situations and strategies and things that are going to make a difference. If you put yourself in a corner as a woman when you walk into a room with men and wait to be given that space, you will not. So you prepare yourself, you make sure you walk into the room with confidence, and you make sure that you're getting there with the sense that you also know just as much as they do. So it's not about sometimes feeling that you want to be silent. No. Because if you keep quiet, then you're going to be taken as the one who's going to take notes. Who everybody's saying, have you taken that note down? Have you caught that so that you can tell us after? You should be able to manage yourself and give contributions as much as the men are giving contributions. So over time, I learned that being a woman in the room was not something for me to shrink away from, but it was something for me to use and to use it well. Because if you look at, there's a book that one of my favorites is John Maxwell, about the self-aware leader. And he says, you cannot change what you do not see. So you cannot change how people see you at first, but you can change how you see yourself as a woman. Not as an outsider trying to fit in, but as someone whose presence means something in any room that you're walking into. So for me, every time I've spoken up, every time I've stayed in difficult situations, it has become for me something to grow from and not to take it as a challenge. And that's, like I said, visibility and perception is one of the biggest barriers as a woman in leadership. I remember even the first time I became Secretary General in the Federation, the key caucus of the Federation was men. And every time we went into a meeting, they would say, do you have a pen and paper? And I'll tell them I've not carried a pen and paper, but I'm here. I will take note of everything. I will take note of it, even if it's on my phone, but I'm here to also discuss and contribute to this discussion. It's not about me carrying a pen and paper. No. Yes, I'm the SG, but it's not about pen and paper. It's about me contributing to this discussion. We're having the discussion. I will also have an input into this discussion. The second barrier that has been there is actually something that has been touched on by the registrar, is about access and inclusion. And when you look at access and inclusion, I would look at it in a very different perspective, because not everything is discussed, not all deals are done in formal meetings. Most of them are done outside the boardrooms, at coffee shops, out when people are playing golf, when people are having a drink. And so as a woman, most of the time you'll find that you're finding it difficult and uncomfortable to get into these spaces. Why? Because you find men, it's very easy for men to connect. It's very easy for men to find themselves having a drink somewhere just to discuss certain issues. But I realized that where influence is built is out of those boardrooms. And I started asking myself, how do I get to build networks, to build influence out of the boardroom? Because sometimes just before meetings and even after meetings, that's when people are discussing in little groups. So I started reaching out and trying to make sure that I can fit in some of those spaces, not those that make me uncomfortable. You don't have to force yourself to put yourself in situations that make you uncomfortable, but it's being able to network, to create influence, to create support groups out of those meetings that are happening. So in order to break access and inclusion, you sometimes have to go out of your way and get into those uncomfortable spaces. You have to take the initiative. Take the initiative and be willing to be in those uncomfortable situations. And so the access and inclusion, and like VP has said, sometimes men form those allies, but why can't women form the allies too? The problem is with women, sometimes we want to fight each other and step on each other and bring down the person who's going up instead of letting them go up and looking for their hand for them to pull you up. So the access and inclusion has to come from us as women. It doesn't have to wait for the men to create allies for us. Yes, they're there, good stuff, but let's do it ourselves also. The last one that for me is very big, and I'm sure for most people, is balance. Just finding that balance. Balancing leadership, balancing work, balancing family is crazy. It's hard. But there are seasons, there's a season for everything. And it's sometimes up to a woman not to feel that, not to feel guilty when they want to take a break from a certain, from a certain season or a certain, like for me, it comes from, I have my seasons at work when it's corporate work and I'm really in the corporate space. Then I try to balance out with sports, and sports is there. Then I have to balance out with family, my husband and my kids. But I have also learned that there's no guilt in that. There's no guilt. Women tend to start feeling guilty when they decide to take a break from something and refocus or focus on another thing. So the balance is very difficult for women. And that in itself is a barrier, because if you're not able to juggle all those balls, you can lose it. And some people might think that you're not able to. They might judge you by your capability, but it's not about that. And I really feel that women need to get into spaces where they're not feeling guilty about what they have to do and at what point they've got to do it. I mean, sometimes men say, I've stepped out to play golf, and nobody questions it. But when a woman wants to say, I've stepped out from work or from sports, I've gone to make dinner for my family, you want to start feeling guilty about it. And it's not necessary, in my opinion. But as women, we've got to learn how to get out of that space and to be able to tell ourselves that today I'm in this season and I'm in this space and I'm going to take it in my stride. But if I look at it from the enabler section, I'll just quickly go into it. My number one enabler is mentorship, and mentorship. I've been blessed and I've had blessings to have great mentors. I've had people, men and women, who saw something in me before I did, who pushed me in the direction that I would never have gone into. And sometimes all it takes is someone to tell you can do this. And even when I say that, I remember my late chairman, President Otula, at some point, there were moments when he would tell me, even before I got into the Secretary General seat, I told him I didn't sign up for this. It wasn't in my portfolio at this point in time. I had many other things I wanted to do. And he told me, look, you can do it, and I know you can do it. I see it in you. Why do you want to shy away from it? So I said, okay, fine, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna try. So mentors are very, very important. And for me, I've been blessed to have great mentors along the way, all the way from my work into sports. There are those who are both in corporate spaces as well as in sports who mentor me. Some are in the country, some are not, but all in all, mentorship is one of the things that I would say. The other enabler for me has really been resilience. And resilience is, that kind of resilience that you build when you keep going after being ignored, after people think that you can't do it, and you just keep showing up, and people doubt you, and you keep showing up. When you read Mark Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving Up, it says you can't be an important and life-changing presence for some people without also being a joke and an embarrassment to others. For me, that gives me peace, because it reminds me that everyone will not understand your journey, but that's okay. You don't need everyone's approval to make an impact, but you need your own approval to be able to make an impact. So you don't need everyone. You don't need everyone. So that kind of resilience that you can put up and keep telling yourself you can do it is one of them, my enablers. And the last one really is about purpose. And for me, purpose is what makes what you do and the sacrifices that you give bearable. It's what keeps me grounded when I question if it's worth it. Because when you have purpose and you know the direction in which you're going, then nothing can stop you. Because you absolutely know where you're going. You absolutely know why you're making the sacrifices. That belief, for me, keeps me going, especially in sports, even when it's hard. Because Michelle Obama said in her book, becoming is never about giving up on the idea, and that there's more growing to be done day and day and day after day. So for me, that's it.
Thank you very much, Angie. You've really taken us through an entire smorgasbord of what it takes to become a leader. And I look at it from the perspective of an athlete preparing for the Olympic Games. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to go in prepared. You won't turn up at a World Championship or the Olympic Games without being prepared. So what are you going to do to prepare yourself? Who's in your team to help you prepare? And Angie brings up some very interesting questions or very interesting points that I think gives us a very good segue to our to our poll question. And we'll ask Barbara to take us through that question.
Thank you very much, Angie. And for the next question, we ask, what is the greatest barrier for women to reach sports leadership? You can start sending in your submissions. And we are requesting for your top 3. "24 responses so far, and we are at 47.
Okay, let's just have a look at the questions, the answers that we have.
Okay, so for the poll, 93% say that gender stereotype is one of the barriers that women face in reaching sports leadership. The second one will go to male dominance, stroke patriarchy. And the third one will be societal expectations.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you very much, audience, for sharing your thoughts there on the poll. And please, you're welcome to share any questions or thoughts on the chat, and we shall be coming to them in just a few moments. I have a follow-up question for Madam Registrar. And actually, if it's okay, Madam Registrar, I'd love to speak to the question that Madam Retired Ranjit mentioned earlier. So who will implement these changes or that we have enforced or enshrined in the law? And what enforcement mechanisms could we have to accelerate equity? Madam Registrar.
Thank you once again. For me to answer that question, I'll have to say that our current laws and policies provide a foundation for equity in sports leadership, but they are not yet sufficient to fully guarantee it. However, gaps remain in the implementation, gender representation, and accountability. Why? You remember when we kicked off, you asked the poll about class ceiling in leadership, whether it is falling or not. According to me, that class ceiling is the main problem. Class ceiling in leadership is actually showing that it shows signs of cracking against women, but it has not fallen yet. So, which means there is progress. However, that progress is uneven. And when we talk of class ceiling, we are talking of barriers that prevent individuals from rising to higher positions because of their backgrounds, because of their roles and all that. And this one actually affects women most and the marginalized groups. Now, what am I saying when I say that it is the issue of implementation? When we have signs of progress. You remember when I came in as a sports registrar in 2013, the first meeting I was called to attend, there was no single woman leader. Apart from a few like Ina Shiveka, Agnes Oluoch, and others. You see, like Agnes Oluoch was the president for Paralympic for a very long time. Then Elena Shiveka has been the vice chairman of Hockey Union, where Mr. Randiek is coming from. And then you find like Madam Wanji is from tennis, and she's the Secretary General. We are not saying that fully all the senior positions are with the men, but the few positions that women are holding as senior officials are very few. So when it is an issue of implementation, you go back to the Constitution of Kenya 2010. What does the preamble say? It emphasizes on the importance of equality as an essential value of Kenya's governance. Article 10 gives us the national values and principles of governance, which include human dignity, public participation, inclusivity, equality, human rights, non-discrimination, and protection of marginalized communities. What does Article 27 say? It is an anchor for provision on equality, which guarantees every Kenyan equality and freedom from discrimination. What does Article 27 say? It prohibits any form of discrimination. And 27.7 is actually obliging all of us to implement two-thirds gender rule to ensure inclusion of women in socioeconomic, cultural, and political spheres. Article 21.3, state officers are charged with the duty to address the needs of vulnerable groups in society, and that one includes women and children. And women and children are recognized as part of special interest groups, and their participation and inclusion is enhanced. When you go to Article 41 on labor relations, it guarantees sports people their employment rights. Why am I taking you people through all this? So that you know that that responsibility is not only for state officers. Because when you go further with the Constitution, it is actually the responsibility of all of us to ensure and observe the principles of our supreme law, because that law belongs to the people. And that's why when you find that you're violating any article of the Constitution, anybody out there can take anybody to a court of law using the provision of the Constitution. So the responsibility is not only us. As the registrar, I'm doing my part. When I realized women are not in senior positions and are being discriminated upon, they were not even vying, I came up with, to implement the two-thirds gender rule, I decided as a registrar that you are not going to bring an application before the office of the registrar if you are bringing one gender as three officials, the chairman, secretary, and treasurer. At first, it was very hectic. I was even taken to court, and I stood by it, quoted the provisions of the Constitution, and I succeeded and defeated the person who took me to court. And that provision is working very well. If you bring 3 men in my office with an application as the secretary, chairman, and treasurer, I reject until you bring another gender to make it two-thirds gender rule. Now, even in the constitutions, this time I'm not registering any constitution unless you commit yourself in the constitution that you are going to implement the two-thirds gender rule. Recently, when NOC was having elections, you know, I speak from what I do and the experience I've seen. I forced them to amend their constitution that unless they meet the two-thirds gender rule, I'll not accept their election results. And it forced them to amend that constitution on the floor to ensure that the two-thirds gender rule is achieved in knock. Because you cannot be preaching about non-discrimination and inclusivity as knock, and you are not doing it yourselves. That's why you amended on the floor. The role of the state officer is to ensure that what the Constitution provides is implemented. What is the role of my stakeholders? Our stakeholders have the same role, and that's why you take the registrar every day to court. So the responsibility is to all of us. Now, can I have another set of questions? If there is no question on this. Thank you.
Yes, we shall have a question coming up for you from Dr. Emmanuel Agunda. I think that's one of our male allies, but we'll just take a minute a few minutes, before we come back to Dr. Emmanuel's question. And I'll just quickly go to Colonel Retired Randiek. What practical steps can men in sports take to open the doors for women? I know earlier you spoke about ensuring that we are not looking at the aspects of empty symbols, but if you were to provide practical steps, what would those be? Maybe 2 or 3.
Thank you, Doreen. Madam Rose Wasike is my good friend, and I always like, sparring with her. Madam Wasike, I know that you've given us a lot of legislation which is supposed to support our case, actually the case that we are discussing. But I want to narrow it down to your office. And I want to give you a secret that you might not be knowing or you might be aware of. When people bring papers to you and people tell you, this is our president, this is our secretary general, and this is our treasurer. That is the ideal situation. When you go down to some of these federations of ours, the ideal varies from the actual. You find that the woman who was there as the treasurer is actually not the treasurer on the ground. So she is actually just being used. So that is a secret that I think you should investigate in some of our federations, and you will find that it is true. So what you are trying to make right, we are busy actually not doing so, and making sure that you are not aware of what is happening. The other thing I would like to mention in reference to Madam Wasike is when you look at our constitutions, in fact, I will touch on our constitution, Kenya Hockey Union. Our constitution supports the two-thirds and it preserves positions for women. So those positions cannot be taken by men. Whether women pretend that there are no women to take the positions or willing or capable, they will have to look and bring women who can occupy those positions. So we are not just talking about it. We are doing it and we are making it happen. So if other federations would follow suit, then I think we will be doing a lot to help the cause that we are trying to discuss. Now to come back to the question that has been posed to me, what practical steps can men in sports take to open doors for women leaders? This is an area which is very interesting, and I would like to touch on that. I would like to touch on something that Angela actually put across, which is very true. Women are their own enemies. So you see sometimes we actually pull back and let them sort themselves out, instead of us spending a lot of energy trying, to sort them out. So then once they've sorted themselves out and they're tired, then we come in now to sort them out. Okay, let me go back to the question. I think women, if we want to help, the first step we should take is listen. We should listen, learn, and understand the situation. Because most of the time we think we understand the situation, but we don't. And then we rush into solutions which do not work. And it doesn't help. So once we have listened, we have learned, and we have understood, then and then only we must act. And our actions must be seen. And how can these acts of ours be seen? Then, if we are pretending, or we mean what we are talking about, we should nominate women for these leadership roles. We should nominate and ensure that they take and play their roles effectively. We should walk by them, we should support them, we should hold their hands until they are capable of walking on their own. We must ensure inclusive hiring panels and calling out inequity. We must further create safe spaces for women to lead and not for them to fail. We can effectively do both. We can put you in a position and in equal measures work so hard to get you to fail. And then justify our case that, you see, even when they are given these opportunities, they are not up to the task. So those are things that we must actually be true to ourselves. Allyship must be intentional and consistent if we want women to grow. But empty talk will never get us anywhere. And I think there must always be follow-through. If there's no follow-through, then nothing is going to happen. When we talk about 2/3, Madam Wasike, please do remember that our highest office in this country, the legislation or the legislatures, that is the parliament. They've worked so hard, yet to date, they've not achieved the 2/3 majority or the 2/3 inclusion in that parliament. So what are we talking about? Are these the same people who are going to ensure that federations adhere to that law? Do they have a moral standing if they themselves cannot do it? I don't know, but we have to pray, and we have to pray so hard for God to listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kalanuchad Ranjek, for those insights. I think one thing or actually two things that I'll take away from this is that you're talking about ensuring that we call out inequity where we see it. And this, I think, applies not only for our male allies, but for even women, where we see gaps in leadership, that we should not wait for special occasions, but calling out as soon as we see it, and also following through to ensure that what we have in our constitutions and in other forums are also applied elsewhere. So we'll have our final question for the panel to our dear Angie. So what advice would you give the next generation of women leaders? What should they consider?
Thank you, Doreen. The first thing the next generation of women needs to consider is about owning their space. and ensuring that they don't wait for permission. Don't wait until you're fully ready. Nobody ever is perfect. Nobody is ever ready. So don't wait for perfect timing. Just go out, do it. Because the earlier you start owning your space, the easier it becomes for those who follow you to be able to do the same. So it's not a matter of waiting. Speak up when your voice matters, and take that space. You'll grow as you keep going along. And I think I spoke to that. Build networks and deep networks. You need people around you who can challenge you, who can vouch for you, who can teach you, who can remind you of who you are, who don't have to wait for you just to keep saying yes. So you need to be able to build the right networks around you and people who can be able to, you know, to say your name in a room, even when you're not in it. So it's not about titles, because leadership is all about relations and how you're building those relations and how you're using those relations. It's important to also redefine what strength is like and what it's all about. Because strength is not about being loud, it's not about being feisty, it's not about being abrasive. It's about being steady and being self-aware. Self-aware of who you are, of what your gaps are, and what your strengths are, and making sure that you can be able to command respect with who you are, the authentic person that you are, and the person that you can be able to build. What matters most is how you're able to define yourself and build from there. The next thing is about not chasing balance, but being able to create that alignment. Because, like we say, balance is difficult, it is hard. And as a woman, especially, it's even harder than it is for men. So what matters most is about what season you are in your life and what you want to keep and what you want to focus on during that season. So if you create the alignment and you're sure and focused on what season it is that you are in your life, go for it. Don't wait to try and create perfect moments. Learn to say no and mean it. Sometimes in the journey of leadership, we want to say yes to everything. But every opportunity isn't your assignment. Not every opportunity. We carry burdens as women of trying to do everything. At home, in the community, at work. Protect your image and don't feel guilty about it. Find your voice and use it for others. Once you have access, use it to open doors for others. Pull another woman into the conversation, recommend another woman. Speak her name in rooms that she hasn't entered, because who knows, next time she would be the one that will be raising you. She could be the one that will be pulling you. And last but not least is about keep on learning and keep on becoming. Stay curious, stay humble. Leadership isn't a title to win. It's a craft that you have to keep refining day by day. So the best leaders never stop learning who they are. They never stop learning what is around them. They never stop learning how to do things and how to make things better and how they can serve better. So for me, those are the things that I would really say should be able to build the next generation of leaders and what they should be able to focus on. Don't wait for the world to validate you. Define yourself. Define yourself and hold that ladder steady for the next woman climbing after you.
Thank you so much, Angie, for those powerful words. I think for everyone in the audience has had that when we get into that space, we create space for others. And now I think we'd like to start winding down. And we do have a few questions that have been put for us in the chat. So I'll have Barbara moderate that section for us. So Barbara, perhaps would pick a question for each of the panelists. And panelists, as you respond to that question, you could also provide your closing remarks as you provide a response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doreen, for that. So this question is addressed to Madam Registrar Rosa Sikem from Dr. Emmanuel Agunda. What specific provisions in the Sports Act 2013 address gender equity in sports leadership? Secondly, how does the Registrar's Office monitor compliance with gender equity laws among registered sports organizations? Lastly, what penalties or corrective actions are taken against federations that fail to meet gender representation requirements?
Thank you so much for that, Barbara. I believe Madam Registrar has touched on the first question in terms of what aspects of the Sports Act are covered, and she did mention the laws. But I think we could summarize the second and third question as we look at how are the enforcement mechanisms applied for registered federations.
The registrar has not touched on the barriers for women to reach sports leadership. So I want to summarize them. I know you know them, but I want to summarize them before I answer my questions. Number one, that issue of gender stereotype and bias, where men believe that they are the only people in senior positions and roles, should come to an end. Because what a man can do, a woman can do better. Then male-dominated networks is a problem to us. Wherever you go, whether it is in a hotel or a bar, you will find sportsmen sitting together discussing issues that affect federations. It is important that these men of ours start now accommodating our women in sports, so that these women can also learn from them. If they have qualities that they believe women don't have, then let them be the ones to also trickle their qualities to our women. Why are we lacking female role models? And why are we having few women in top positions? Because when women want to vie as chairman, vice chairman, or secretary or treasurer, a man will go his way to look for a stronger male candidate to vie against the woman. Can our men also help us to ensure that our women are at the top positions? Can you campaign for our women also, instead of campaigning against them and saying they are not good leaders? And most of the time why they say that, it's because women are strict and they don't want people who are strict at the top of the leadership. Then, when they are recruiting and promoting their staff and all that, even in terms of recruitment, can we avoid discrimination? Because in the Employment Act, it is very clear, indirect and direct discrimination in terms of employment and promotion is not allowed. And there's a penalty for that, though I can't remember the penalty now. You can read section 6 and 5. One is on sexual harassment at the workplace, and another one is on direct discrimination. Even paying ILO Convention 100 and ILO Convention 11 outlaws differences in remuneration for the work of the same value. It should be equal pay for work of value. Media representation. Why our women are not being seen. When you go for a meeting, even if you are the one who is actually leading that meeting, they will pick on one man who spoke so much and forget about the woman leader who was leading the group. On that man. Can we also ensure that women, our own women, should also be trained as media personnel? I remember the person who made me get interested in sports was Elina Shiveka. By then she was called Elina Sifuna. I used to admire her very much when she used to broadcast on KBC about sports. Can we have other women who can be trained on the media so that they are able to also articulate issues relating to women at that level for women to be seen? You know, women work so much, but they are treated as if they don't work and they are not supposed to be seen. That thing we need to address it as sports fraternity. Come to underrepresentation and slow. Now, let me go to the government. I've spoken about the stakeholders. Now, nitakosoa serikali yangu na mimi niko ndani. We are very slow in legal and policy change. We've been reviewing this Sports Act ever since I came in. Immediately I came in, I highlighted the many challenges that I thought would affect the sports fraternity and made various recommendations. And we've been amending it since 2014. Up to today, we are amending. And so far, I want to commend the current leaders in the office because they set up a task force. And most of the issues that we are discussing here, I raised in the task force and we are addressing them. And imagine we are still implementing our sports policy, our national sports policy of 2005. 2005 is really outdated. That's the policy that needs to come out with all the strategies to counter now, deal with all these things that we are raising from the beginning of this conference up to the end. It will give responsibility to each stakeholder, what they need to do, what they need to do. It is not only the government that needs to do that responsibility, it is all of us. So the strategies and strategic objectives should be addressed to all the stakeholders. Each stakeholder will be given a role, and that's what we are doing as a task force. Now to go back to the question, Madam, I speak too much until I forget the question. You said I talk about gender equity, penalties in the Sports Act, and what else?
Monitoring compliance.
Monitoring compliance. When I started at the beginning of the conference, I said that the Sports Act failed to address the issues relating to women, children, and the marginalized. Actually, the entire thing of inclusivity was left out. But the only section that is addressing leadership is section 46.6, which allows any person to vie for a position. So our women, you have a right to vie, but you've been hiding under women rep. I don't know why. It is now our women to pull their socks and ensure that they compete against men. But if we know that our women cannot reach that level, then the way Mr. Randiek spoke, the only way out is to do the way our Kenyan government is doing when they go for election. You put two people at the top, one man and one woman. When they vie, whoever will pass, then one of them will be of either gender, the chair and the vice. Then on athletic representative who is elected, we go the North way. One man, one woman to represent athletes. Youth, 1 man, 1 woman to represent the youth. And then where election is done and maybe 2/3 gender rule has not been reached, then the clause of nomination of either change that is disadvantaged should come in. That's how I'm implementing that particular clause. Now, in terms of penalties, the Sports Act actually failed us so much. It only gave us a general penalty without proper penalties. And if you want penalties, then you have to refer to other acts of parliament. You link. We only have a general penalty of 50,000 for any offense committed under the Sports Act. In my closing remarks, I want to urge all of us, not only the government, all of us, men, women in sports, to be aggressive and to know their rights. Can you know your rights? Mine is to urge all of us to recognize the main principles of our Constitution, which are very good and very clear. The principle of equality, which emanates from the preamble, all the way to the core values, all the way to our section on non-discrimination and inclusivity and non-discrimination. And women, please stop fearing and fighting each other. For me to become a registrar, and I had heard that sports is very difficult to manage, it had to take me courage to read, research, understand the industry, and I said, no, I've shaped labor, now I'm going to shape sports. I was even called by the former registrar of societies, Madam, don't take it up, go back to labor. I said, no, I'll take it up. As a woman, you should not fear. Make firm decisions, move forward, compete competitively with them. If you are defeated, let them nominate you because they know you can work. But fearing and hiding under femaleship and thinking you'll just be given jobs or you'll be given positions, that's not right. I've never used any godfather in my life to get promotion. My mouth, my research, and my mind. And when I make decisions, I take risks. If you don't take risks, you'll not make it. If you fear taking risks, then you cannot be a leader. Those are my closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Registrar. Audience, I do appreciate we are over the time that we had set aside, but we only have 3 questions left. One for Colonel Retired Randiek, one for Angela Lutivia, and one actually to the audience that you shall answer as you leave. But Barbara, take us to the next question.
So the next question, we give it to Colonel Randiek. What are some of the specific initiatives being implemented at the Kenya Hockey Union to increase women participation in leadership roles within sports management and governance?
Thank you very much, Barbara. I think already we are doing, I will not say that we are doing enough. We have done enough, but we are still doing more to ensure that we get more women on board. What are we talking about? We are talking about our subcommittees. We have subcommittees, where in these subcommittees, in each we have about 11 subcommittees, and the 12th one is a ad hoc one. And in these subcommittees, we have 5 members in each subcommittee. And what we have decided is that in each subcommittee, we will not have less than 2 women. We can have more, but we will not have less than 2. And that is one way of ensuring that we have more women participating in our committee than previously. If you look at our history, let's say if we take about 20, 30 years ago and you look at the structure of Kenya Hockey Union, you only had one woman on the board, one. You had one woman in the council. And I think it was very discriminative. It was, if we talk about discrimination, that was the highest level of discrimination I've ever seen anywhere. So I think with that, we are going to promote more women. And I pray, it is my prayer that other federations will follow suit. Whether a good number of these women will make it through to the executive board, that is now up to them. They must also not shy away. They must not fight amongst themselves. They should support one another. And I think with the true allyship from the few men who mean it, they will actually make it to the board. If 2 or 3 make it to join the 3 who are already there, that is good enough. And with time, I think we will have women in one federation, and I hope that that one will keep on replicating to other federations. When we talk about governance, I think most of the time people think about money. But you know, governance is not all about money. Governance is about everything. Governance is about how we conduct ourselves, how we run our affairs, how we, you know, our day-to-day activities within our federation. Are we walking along the lines of our constitution? Are we following our constitution to the letter? You know, our constitution might be moving south and we are moving north. Then when we look at the issue of governance, and then I think if you put it on a weighing scale, then we actually fail. But I think in Kenya Hockey Union, we run our affairs in accordance with our constitution, in accordance with the Sports Act, in accordance with the National Constitution of Kenya. So I think we might not be the best, but I think we are trying our best to actually live within the expected norms of the normal governance within a sports organization. My closing remarks are very simple, straightforward, and I hope will be understood. I think, in my personal perspective, as we reflect on today's discussion, let us all remember that change begins with us. Let us remember that breaking the glass ceiling is not a one-time event. Let us remember that breaking that glass ceiling is a collective, ongoing effort. Let's commit, let us all who are here, panelists, the audience, let us commit to building inclusive systems. Most of us come from federations. Let us build inclusive systems. And most important, let us amplify women's voices and ensure that leadership in sports reflects the diversity of those who play, of those who coach, and let it inspire all. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe, and I believe that most of you believe, that the road ahead is ours to shape. So let us walk it together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Second Deputy. Final question for Angie and closing remarks.
To Angie, as we look ahead, what bold and transformative steps do you believe Kenya Sports Institution must take to ensure that gender equity in leadership is not just...
Ngoja kidogo, ngoja. Unajua trademark yangu.
Can you speak that first?
Apologies for that. I'll repeat the question once again to Angie. As we look ahead, what bold and transformative steps do you believe Kenya Sports Institution must take to ensure that gender equity in leadership is not just a policy goal, but a lived reality across all federations?
Thank you, Barbara. That question is quite interesting because I'm sure it has been answered by the registrar and touched on also by our first vice. But now, what I would like to say is, much as institutions can take decisions to create inclusivity in their policies, the onus really is on the women within the institution, and them deciding to raise up their hands and them deciding to put their voices forward and then deciding whether they want to take up these leadership positions. If we don't show up and policies are there, then it basically means the policies will not work. So to us women, I would ask, are we ready to show up when the policies are in our favor? Not because we want to sit back, and like the registrar said, we want to sit back and wait for favors. No, we're not asking for favors as women. We should be asking for fairness and equity, and not favors. Are we ready to take up those spaces? Because we believe that if we take them up, we are going to make things better, and we are going to make sports and these institutions better. And I think that, for me, would be the question. Because the policies in some of these institutions are there, but are the women standing up to be counted? Is the question. And so, with that, I want to jump to my closing remarks. The journey for me, as we discussed, both from the registrar's point of view, from a man's point of view, the journey isn't easy. There's still rooms that are closed. There's still networks that seem out of reach. There's still systems that take time to change. Policies are there, but those systems might take quite a bit of time to change. But becoming and making sure leadership is in the women's power is about never giving up on the idea that there is more growing to be done. And that's exactly what we should be doing. Growing, becoming, and making sure that the door stays open behind us. The next generation, I hope that you know that you're not left behind. These sessions should be preparing us to grow, to keep showing up, to keep learning, to keep becoming. Because every time we learn, we grow, we become as women, the glass ceiling cracks just a little bit more. And as it cracks, we keep building a future in sports where women don't just participate, and we shape the agenda. We drive the vision And we'll start redefining the leadership that looks like, what leadership looks like for those who will come after us. So let's keep showing up, let's keep becoming, let's keep learning until that crack is not just a crack, but it bursts open for all of us. So I just want to thank you for reminding us that the future of sports is not just about being inclusive, but being courageous and keeping it female. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angie. And thank you so much, audience, for staying with us until the very end. I just have one slide to present where you shall be able to pick up the final list of resources that are available as Barbara also shares with us the final poll question. So if you could have the slide up with the final page for today and also the poll question coming up. So thank you very much. So I'd encourage you to look at those resources. These are IOC IOC webinars. The first one is on male allyship. So please scan the QR code to access that. And then the second one is on how to build capacity or have an action plan for your federations. Also an IOC webinar. Please follow that QR code to access that webinar as well. These webinars are a couple of years old, but they do have very important and very useful information that I think we can all learn from. So I'll just request for the final poll question to go out. But as you're thinking about it, just have you had a mentor, sponsor, or ally in your sports journey? How do they impact your path? And we shall not go through every single detail of this today, but this will help us prepare for our next conversations on mentorship that has been touched on by both Angela and also Colonel retired Randiek. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for your time. Thank you so much for your patience as well. You've spent quite a bit of time with us, more than had been allocated, but we do appreciate each and every one of you for participating through the chat, through the poll questions, and also giving us insights from your perspective. I would also want to say a very, very big thank you to our three panelists. Madam Registrar Rose Wasike, we really appreciate your time, your insights, and also showing us the path as to how we can apply the law, or the law can be applied to our federations and how we can enable equity within them. Thank you so much, Colin retired Randiek, who's our second deputy at NOC. You have given us a lot of insights as to how we can work, or men can work with women to ensure leadership is an important, is not just a one gender conversation, but all of us can participate, and it's an inclusive systems that are built. And finally, Angela, thank you for sharing your personal perspective. They have been very insightful, they have been very inspiring, and we hope that you continue growing in your leadership journey.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, and have yourselves a good evening. Who's with the view?
Thank you. Asante sana. Mnanipata kweli? Imeisha.
Imeisha Dr. Emmanuel, lakini tunakupata.
Nani hiyo? Hiyo nani? Dorothy?
Yes.
Sikujui, lakini una sauti nzuri sana.
Thank you. I'm from Kenya Federation of American Football.
Unafaa kuweka kamera ndio nikuone, ndio kuja kutafuta.
Tuonana tu. Bye bye.
Ati